by Mustafa Mounassir and Tariq Mounassir. Chapter 1. It was the first day of the holidays. Hans was standing on the bank of the river. His friends, Karl and Otto, were with him. The boys were throwing stones across the river. "What are we going to do?" Otto asked. "We can't stay here all day." "You're our leader," Karl said to Hans. "What shall we do? Tell us." Both the boys looked at Hans. Hans was 14 years old. He was older than Karl and Otto, so he was their leader. "I have an idea," Hans told them. "It came to me last night. My father was telling me about an adventure. He had this adventure when he was a boy. He and two friends got boat and they sailed down the river." "Did they go far?" Otto asked. "Yes, they went through the forest," Hans answered. "They spent about a week on the river." "I like the idea," Karl said. "But we haven't got a boat, so how can we go down the river?" "My uncle has a boat," Otto said. "It's an old boat but it's strong. My uncle doesn't use it now, so perhaps he will let us have it. We can ask him." "We must go and look at the boat," Hans said. "Where does your uncle live?" "His house isn't far from here," Otto replied. "I'll take you there." Otto led them along the river bank. His uncle lived near the river and he kept his boat in his garden. Otto took his friends into the garden and showed them the boat. "It's old, but it's a good boat," Hans said. "But will your uncle let us use it?" "I'll go and ask him," Otto said. He ran into the house and asked his uncle. When he came back, he was laughing. "He says we can have the boat," Otto shouted. "But we must clean and paint it. There may be a hole in the boat. We must put it in the water. If there is a hole in it, the water will come in." The boys pulled the boat to the river and put it in the water. Hans sat in the boat. Only a little water came in. "It's only a small hole," Hans said. "We can soon mend it." The boys pulled the boat out of the water. Then they took off their shirts and began work. They worked hard all the morning. They cleaned the boat. Then Otto went to his uncle's house and got some paint. After that the boys painted the boat. While Otto and Karl were painting, Hans filled up the hole. "The water can't come in now," he said. At last, the boys finished their work. They sat near the boat and rested. "It's like a new boat now," Otto said. "That will please my uncle." "We haven't finished yet," Hans said. "When the paint is dry, we must paint the boat again." "We'll do that tomorrow." "When shall we leave?" Karl asked. "It's Friday today," Hans said. "We must work tomorrow." "Shall we leave on Monday?" "Yes, I can go then," Otto said. "I must ask my father," Karl told them. "But I think he will let me come." "Good," Hans said. "We've done enough work today. but we must start early tomorrow." After that the three boys went home. Chapter 2. The boys came back the next morning. When they went into the garden, they saw a girl there. She was standing near the boat. "Who's that?" Hans asked. "That's my cousin Elsa," Otto explained. "She knows we want to use the boat. My uncle has told her." "What do you want here?" Hans asked Elsa. "We have a lot of work to do." "I want to help," Elsa said. "I'll paint the boat if you like." "Let her do it if she wants to," Otto said quietly to Hans. "Or she may go and tell my uncle." "All right," Hans said. "But you must understand. We're going to take this boat down the river, but you can't come with us. Is that clear?" "I didn't ask to come, did I?" Elsa said. So, while Elsa was painting the boat, the boys talked. They talked about the journey. "We'll need a lot of things for the journey," Hans told them. "I'll make a list." Hans took a pencil and some paper from his pocket. "We must take a lot of food," Otto said. "That is very necessary on a journey. And we must cook, so we'll need pots," Hans added. "Who can bring those?" "My mother has some old pots," Karl said. "I'll ask her for them." Hans wrote these things on his list. "What about blankets?" Otto asked. "Bring 2 blankets," Hans said. "That will be enough." "My uncle has a map of the river," Otto said. "I'll ask him for it." "Yes, we'll need a map," Hans said. He had quite a long list now. He read it to them. "What have we forgotten?" he asked. "Matches," Elsa said. "Don't forget to take some matches, or you won't be able to light a fire." Hans wrote matches on his list. Then he put the list in his pocket. "Good," he said. "We'll get the food today." After that they helped Elsa. The boat was soon ready. Then they went home. Elsa went home too, but she came back to the boat. She wanted to hide the paddles. She took the paddles and hid them under some leaves. Chapter 3. It was Monday morning. Hans arrived early. He brought his food and blankets. Then Karl came. The 2 boys pulled the boat to the river and put it on the water. "It's almost 6 o'clock, Hans said. "Why hasn't Otto come? He isn't usually late." Then Otto appeared. But he was not alone. Elsa was with him. "What does that girl want?" Hans cried. "She can't come with us. I told her that." "But we can't go without her," Otto said. "Why not?" Hans asked. He was rather angry. "Your uncle gave the boat to us. We needn't take Elsa." "But she's hidden the paddles," Otto explained. "She won't give them to us." The boys looked for the paddles, but they could not find them. "What have you done with them?" Hans asked. Tell us. I'll tell you if you promise to take me, Elsa answered. The boat is big enough. Oh, all right, Hans said. We'll take you. Do you promise? Elsa asked. Yes, we promise, Hans replied. Now go and get the paddles. Bring your food and blankets too. Be quick. My things are ready, Elsa said, and she ran off. She soon came back. She was carrying a bag and some blankets. You haven't brought the paddles, Otto said. Wait a minute, Elsa said. They're under those leaves. I'll go and get them. Elsa got the paddles and gave them to the boys. Now we must put the things in the boat, Hans told them. We're already late. They put their things in the boat. Then the boys and Elsa got in. Hans sat at the back of the boat. He took a paddle and pushed the boat to the middle of the river. The water flowed quickly and carried the boat with it. It was not hard work. They went past their village. They could see the forest in front of them. The sun was coming up when they reached the forest. Their adventure was beginning. Chapter 4. It was cold in the forest. The river flowed between the trees. The trees were thick, like great walls. The sun did not come through them. The river flowed slowly now and the boys had to use the paddles. After an hour Otto said, I'm getting hungry. Can't we stop and have some breakfast? Good idea, Hans said. I'm rather hungry too. We can light a fire and make some tea. But we must find a place to land. There's a good place over there, Karl said. He was sitting in the front of the boat. He pointed to the right bank of the river. Look, over there. There aren't many trees. They paddled the boat to the bank. Karl jumped out and tied up the boat. He tied it to a small tree. I'll light the fire, Hans said. Go and get some wood, he told Karl and Otto. Elsa, you can get the food out of the boat. Then get a pot and fill it with water. Karl and Otto went and looked for wood. Hans took some paper and some small dry sticks. Who has the matches? He asked Karl and Otto when they came back. The two boys were carrying a lot of wood. You made a list, Otto said. Didn't you bring them? I haven't got any, Karl said. Now what shall we do? Then Elsa came with the pot of water. What's the matter? She asked. Aren't you going to light the fire? We forgot to bring any matches, Hans told her. His face was very red. Oh, I have some, Elsa said. She went to her bag and took out a box of matches. She gave the matches to Hans. Hans thanked Elsa and lit the fire. When it was burning well, Elsa put the pot on it. Then she made some tea. While they were eating, the boys looked at the map. Can we go far today? Otto asked. We can go about 15 miles, Hans replied. It won't be hard. He pointed to a place on the map. We can stop here. The warden of the forest has a house near the river. The warden knows my father. We can go and see him in the morning. Perhaps we can explore the forest with him. Yes, I want to explore the forest, Otto said. There are a lot of strange birds in the forest and I want to see them. After that they put out the fire and continued their journey down the river. They stopped again at noon because they were hungry. They had some food but did not light a fire. There was a small hill near the river and the boys climbed it. When they reached the top, they could see over the trees. Can you hear a noise? Carl asked. It's an engine, isn't it? The boys listened. I think it's a plane, Hans said. He was right. Soon they saw a small plane. It was low in the sky and it was flying over the trees. The plane flew past them. It flew among the trees and after that the boys could not see it. Is the plane going to land? Cart asked. Perhaps the pilot is in trouble. The pilot can't land in the forest, Hans replied. There isn't a place to land. Look, there it is again. The plane flew over their heads. It was high in the sky and it did not come back. After that the boys went down the hill. I don't understand it, Hans said. What is a plane doing in the forest? What does the pilot want here? Chapter 5. It was afternoon. Hans was sitting at the back of the boat and he was looking at the map. The warden's house isn't far from here, he said. About 4 or 5 miles we may arrive there before night. Elsa was at the front of the boat. She was watching the river. Suddenly she shouted, "Stop the boat. There's a big tree across the river." The boys stopped the boat with the paddles. The tree was very large, they could not get past it with their boat. We can't move the tree, Hans said. We can lift the boat over the tree but it won't be easy. And we may make a hole in the boat. What shall we do then? Otto asked. We'll have to lift the boat out of the river and carry it through the forest, Hans said. We can't do it here, Cart said. The banks are high and there are thick bushes on them. Then we must go back, Hans said. We'll find a place without bushes. So, they turned the boat and went up the river again. But the bushes are thick on both sides and they couldn't find a place. I'm sorry, Hans said. We'll have to lift the boat over the tree. I don't like the idea, but we must try. So, they went back to the tree again. Hans got out of the boat and climbed on the tree. These branches are quite small, he told them. I can cut them off. Then we can lift the boat over the tree. Hans took the axe and cut off the branches. Now give me 2 blankets, he said. He put the blankets over the tree. I'm ready now, Hans said. One of you must stand in the water. Then he can push the boat from behind. I'll do that, Carl said. I'm taller than Otto. They took their bags out of the boat and put them on the tree. Then Otto and Elsa climbed on the tree. Otto was ready to help Hans. Karl jumped into the water. "It's cold," he said, "but it's not very deep." Then Hans held the front of the boat and lifted it. Karl pushed the boat from the back. Slowly the boat came out of the water. It was hard work, but soon the boat was resting on the tree. Then Karl swam under the tree. He took the front of the boat and pulled it slowly. The boat came down into the water. Soon the boat was on the river again. They put their bags in it and climbed in. Karl didn't get into the boat. "I'm going to stay in the water," he said. "If I get into the boat, you'll all be wet." "We can't reach the warden's house this evening," Hans said. "It's almost dark and we must find a place for the night." At last, they found a good place among the trees. They lit a big fire and cooked dinner. Karl put his wet clothes near the fire and they were soon dry. It was already dark. They sat near the fire and talked for a time. But they were all tired. They covered themselves with their blankets and fell asleep. Before he fell asleep, Hans remembered the aeroplan. What was it doing in the forest, he asked himself. But Hans was tired too. He pulled his blanket over his head and went to sleep. Chapter 6. Hans woke up first. He could see the sun through the trees. He looked at his watch. It was 8 o'clock. "Wake up," he shouted. "It's late." He threw off his blankets and go up. Then he ran to the river and washed his face in the cold water. Elsa and the boys did the same. They had a quick breakfast. Then they pushed the boat into the river and set off. They sang while they were sailing down the river. "There are a lot of fish in the river," Elsa said. "Some of them are quite big." "We need a fishing line," Otto said. "Then we can catch some fish for dinner." "Perhaps the warden will give us some hooks," Hans told them. "If we have a hook, we can make a fishing line. It's quite easy." Hans was looking at the map of the river. "The warden's house is not far from here," he said. "I'm certain that he has a boat. It may not be in the water, so watch the bank of the river." After a few minutes Karl saw a boat. But it was a big boat and it had an engine. "The warden has a boat," Hans said, "but it's not like that. That's a motor boat." "Look," said Elsa. "There's a second boat. It's under the bushes. It's smaller than the motor boat." "That's the warden's boat," Hans said. "But who owns the big boat?" "Perhaps friends are visiting the warden," Otto said. "Then he has rich friends," Hans said. "A motor boat costs a lot of money." The boys tied up their boat near the motor boat. "Who will look after our boat?" Hans asked. "Our things are in the boat, so one person must stay here." "I'll stay," Elsa said. "I won't come to the warden's house," Otto said. "I want to explore the forest." "Shout when you are ready, and I'll come back." "All right," Hans said. "Karl and I will go to the warden's house." The two boys set off through the trees. They followed a path. The path led to a small field. They could see the warden's house from there. It was across the field. "The warden's at home," Hans said. "Look at the black smoke. He has a big fire." "But what's he burning?" Karl asked. "The smoke is very black. Perhaps he's burning some old things," Hans answered. "Shall we go and ask him?" "Wait," Karl said. They were still among the trees. "Can you hear a noise? Listen." It was the sound of an engine. It was coming nearer. "It's the plane again," Hans said. "Look. It's coming over the trees." The plane was very low. The boys could see the pilot's head. The plane was flying in a circle. "Quickly," Hans said. "Get behind those bushes. We can watch from there." The two boys hid behind the bushes. They had a good view of the field. Two men came out of the warden's house. One had a flag in his hand. He waved the flag 3 times. Then the pilot waved his hand and flew very low. The plane was over the middle of the field. Then the pilot threw a red ting from the plane. After that the plane flew off. The red thing fell through the air. It fell slowly and it landed in the middle of the field. One of the men ran and picked it up. He took it back to the house and then both men went inside. "What was it?" Karl asked. "Could you see?" "It was round like a ball," Hans answered. "But it wasn't a ball because it fell slowly. Perhaps it was a small balloon. There was a bag under it." "But why did the pilot throw it from the plane? And who are these men at the warden's cottage? Why have they come here in their boat?" And then there was the black smoke, Karl added. The black smoke was for the pilot. It showed him the place in the forest. "I think that you're right," Hans said. "Then perhaps the warden is in trouble. These men can't be his friends. We must help him." The two boys stood up. "We must go back to the boat," Hans said. "And tell Otto and Elsa. Stay there," a voice said. The boys turned slowly. 2 men were standing behind them. "You must come with us," one of them said. "Quickly." He pointed to the warden's house. Chapter 7. The 2 men led Hans and Karl across the field. "Let me go," Hans said. "Why are you taking us to the house?" The men did not reply. When they reached the house, one of the men opened the door and pushed the boys inside. There were 2 men inside the room. One of them was fat and he wore good clothes. He had a large ring on his finger. The flag was on the table. But there was no sign of the red balloon. "Who are these boys?" the fat man asked. "What are they doing here?" "We found them near the field, sir," the man replied. They were hiding behind some bushes and watching the house. Is this true? The fat man asked the boys. He spoke quietly, but Hans didn't like his voice. Were you watching the house? What are you doing here? We weren't watching the house, Hans answered. We were walking through the forest. Then we saw the plane. We were watching that. Ah. Of course. You saw the plane, the fat man said. He laughed. Yes. That was my plane. I'm a rich man and I have a big business in the city. So, I have my letters brought every day. I'm on holiday. But I still have work to do. The fat man pulled some letters from his pocket and showed them to the boys. The pilot brought these today. His story may be true, Hans thought. But I don't like this man. I think that he's bad. And where is the warden? But why were you coming to the house? The fat man asked. You haven't told me that. We wanted to see the warden, Hans replied. Is the warden a friend of yours? The fat man asked. He's a friend of my father's, Hans explained. We wanted to spend the day with him. And we wanted some fishing hooks too. I'm afraid that you can't spend the day here, the fat man said. The warden isn't here. He's gone into the forest. He won't come back today. But perhaps we can find some fishing hooks for you. He turned to the man at his side. Go and look for fishing hooks, he ordered. Suddenly there was a loud noise. It came from the next room. A man was beating on the door. He was beating it hard and shouting. Let me go, you can't keep me here. Let me go. He continued to beat on the door. The fat man's face changed. He was very angry. He turned to his two men. Go and stop him, he ordered quickly. He may escape. The two men ran out of the room. After that the noise stopped. The fat man sat there. He did not speak. So, the warden is a prisoner, Hans said to himself. These men have shut him in that room. The fat man won't let us go now because we know this. We're his prisoners too. They were alone with the fat man. He was sitting behind the table. This was the moment to escape. The fat man was not watching them. But suddenly he looked up. You can't escape, he said. One of my men is standing outside the door. But what are you doing to the warden? Hans cried. He's a prisoner here. You can't do this to him. It's not your business, the fat man replied. You must stay here too. I can't let you go. You'll talk about this, he shouted to his men, and they came into the room again. Were these two boys alone? He asked. We saw only these boys, one of the men replied. But how did they come here? The fat man asked. Is there a village up the river? Yes. There is, the man answered. but it's a long way from here and there isn't a path through the forest. So, they came by boat. Go to the river and look, the fat man ordered. And if they have any friends, bring them here. The man went out of the room. Then the fat man turned to the second man. Take the boys to the cellar, he told him. They can't escape from there. The man led Hans and Karl to the cellar and opened the door. If you escape, you won't escape from here, he said. Then he pushed the boys into the cellar and shut the door. Chapter 8. When Hans and Karl set off for the warden's house, Otto went into the forest. He wanted to watch the birds there, but he did not have a chance to watch any birds. He too heard the noise of the plane. It's the plane again, Otto said to himself. It's very near here. He ran through the trees and came to the field. He could not see his friends, but he saw the plane. It flew over the field and it dropped a red thing. A man ran from the house and picked up the red thing. Then he went back to the house. Otto saw all this. But where are Hans and Karl? He asked himself. Have they seen this? I'll call them. He was going to shout when he saw his friends. Two men were taking them across the field. The men took them into the house. Otto waited for his friends, but they did not come out again. They're in trouble, he thought. I must go and tell Elsa. They may need help. He ran back to the boat. He was almost there. But then he put his foot in a hole and fell down. He stood up again, but his foot hurt him very much. But at last, he reached the boat. What's the matter? Elsa asked when she saw Otto. She ran and helped him. What's wrong with your foot? I fell in a hole and hurt it, Otto explained. But that's not important. Hans and Karl are in trouble. Two men have taken them to the warden's house. I waited, but they did not come out again. Are you certain they are in trouble? Elsa asked. Perhaps the men are the warden's friends. Otto told her about the plane and the red thing. I may be wrong, he said. But listen. I have an idea. We can hide here and watch. If Hans and Karl are in trouble, they won't come back. And perhaps the men will come here. Elsa and Otto hid behind some bushes. They waited. Soon a man came down the path. He ran to the boat and looked at it. Then he turned and went back to the house. I was right, Otto said. They are in trouble. We must get help. We can take the boat and go down the river, Elsa said. No, we can't do that, Otto said. The men in the house will miss it, but we can take the warden's boat. That is lighted and it will go quickly. Our boat is heavy. Listen, Elsa said. You go for help, you've hurt your foot, but you can take the boat down the river. I'll stay here. I'll stay in the forest and watch the house. All right, Otto said. But take care. Don't go near the house." Elsa pushed the warden's boat into the river. She put a bag of food and a blanket in the boat. Then she helped Otto to get in. Otto waved goodbye and set off down the river. Elsa went back to the boat again and took out her bag. She wanted to take her blankets. But she thought, "If I take the blankets, the men will notice it." So, she left the blankets in the boat. She put her bag in some bushes. Then she hid herself and waited. In the afternoon 2 men came. They took the bags and blankets from the boat. They pulled the boat out of the water and carried it to the house. Then they came back and took the bags and blankets. Elsa stayed for a long time in the bushes. It was almost night. "I'll go to the field now," she said to herself. "I can watch the house from there." A light was burning in the house. Elsa sat and watched. Then the light went out and the house was dark. Chapter 9. There was not much light in cellar. So, Hans and Karl could not see well. They sat down for a time. "The man has locked the door," Hans said. "He's locked it and we can't escape." "But there is a window," Karl said. The window was small and it was high in the wall. "I'm not very heavy," Karl continued. "Let me stand on your shoulders. Perhaps I can reach the window." Karl climbed on Hans' shoulders. "I can reach it," he said. "But there are iron bars across it. We can't get through iron bars." Karl climbed down from Hans shouted. The boys sat on the ground and talked. "We're prisoners," Hans said. "And there's no way out of here." But they haven't caught Otto and Elsa. "So, we have a chance." "Where's the nearest village?" Karl asked. "Do you remember? There's a village down the river," Hans answered. "But it's about 25 miles from here. If Otto and Elsa have the boat, they can bring help. But it will take a day or 2. And perhaps the men have taken our boat." In the evening a man brought them some food. A second man stood near the cellar door. So, the boys could not escape. The man put the food down and went out. He locked the cellar door again and went off. Night came. It was quiet in the house. Hans and Karl were tired. But they could not sleep because it was cold in the cellar. Then they heard a noise outside the windows. "What's that?" Hans asked. "Did you hear a noise?" "Yes," Karl answered. "It may be an animal or perhaps one of the men is outside the window." "Who's there?" Hans called. "It's me," Elsa, a voice answered. The boys could see a dark shape at the window. It was Elsa's face. "Where are you?" Elsa asked. "I can't see you." "We're down here," Hans answered. "They've locked us in the cellar." "Speak quietly, or the men may hear you." "What are you doing here? Why haven't you gone for help?" Otto has gone. Elsa explained. He hurt his foot but has taken the warden's boat. How I can help you? It isn't possible. Hans told her. They've locked the door and the window has iron bars across it, so we can't escape. Where is the warden? Elsa asked. Is he in the house? Yes, he's in one of the rooms. Hans told her. But he's a prisoner. Like us. You mustn't stay here. Go and hide. Or they will catch you too. The iron bars aren't very thick. Elsa said. Shall I go and look for a rope? You can tie the rope to the bars and perhaps you can move them. All right, look for a rope. Hans said. But take care and don't make any noise. Elsa returned after a few minutes. I've found a rope, she said. She tied one end to a bar. Then she threw the rope to the boys. They pulled hard but they could not move the iron bar. We can't do it, Hans said. Now listen to me. Elsa. Take the rope and go back to the forest. Stay there and wait for Otto. Don't come near the house again. Elsa took the rope but she did not go back to the forest. She stayed near the house. But the boys could not hear her. She's gone, Hans said. I hope they don't find her. Chapter 10. Elsa wanted to free Hans and Karl. I must find the warden, said to herself. He'll be able to help us, so I must go inside the house. Elsa walked round the house. She found a small window at the back. She pushed it and it opened. Elsa climbed through the window. Now she was inside the house. Elsa crept through the dark house. She was afraid but she wanted to find the warden. She saw 3 doors in front of her. The warden was behind one of the doors. I mustn't open the wrong door, she thought. The men will wake up and they'll catch me. Then she saw a key in one of the doors. They've locked this door, she said to herself. So, the warden is in this room. She turned the key quietly. Then she opened the door and crept into the room. It was the right room. The warden was there. Elsa closed the door behind her. The warden was on his bed. There were ropes round his hands and feet. There was a cloth across his mouth. So, he could not speak. Elsa untied the cloth round the warden's mouth. But she could not untie the ropes. It doesn't matter, the warden said. But who are you? What are you doing here? Elsa told the warden her story. They've locked the boys in the cellar, she explained. I want to free them. I want to free you too. You must leave me here, the warden told her. You can't untie these ropes and you can't cut them. They're very thick. And if I escape, the men will look for me. Have you a key for the cellar? Elsa asked. The men have taken my keys, the warden replied. But listen. There's a small hut behind the house. There are some old keys in the hut. One of them is the cellar key. Take it and you can free your friends. Elsa thanked the warden. You must go now, the warden told her. Quickly or the men may wake up, they mustn't catch you here. Elsa tied the cloth across the warden's face. Then she said goodbye and went out of the room. She locked the door again. She was sorry to leave the warden there. Elsa climbed out of the small window and went into the garden. She found the hut behind the house. It was dark inside and she could not see well. But at last, she found the keys. She ran to the cellar window. Hans, she called. Are you awake? The boys were almost asleep. What do you want? Hans asked. Go back to the forest and hide. I've got some key. Elsa said. One of them may open the cellar door. Where did you get them? Hans asked. Don't ask questions now. Elsa answered. I'm going to throw the keys through the window. Catch them. Elsa threw the keys between the bars and they fell on the floor. Hans picked up the keys and grossed to the cellar door. At last, he found the right key and opened the door. There's a small window at the back. Elsa told them. The men are asleep, but go quietly. Hans and Karl went out of the cellar. Hans locked the door behind him. They'll come in the morning and the cellar will be empty, he said. They won't be able to understand it. The boys crept through the house. They found the small window. Elsa was standing outside. Karl climbed through the window. He was thin. So, it was easy for him. But it was not easy for Hans. Because he was bigger. I don't think I can climb through the window, he said. I must find a different way. We'll pull you, Karl said. So, Hans put his head and arms through the window and Elsa and Karl pulled him. At last, Hans was through the window. Then they saw a light in the house. One of the men was awake and he saw walking through the house. He had a light in his hand. Lie down, Hans said quietly. And don't move, but if the man opens the door, run. They lay on the ground and waited. At last, the light went out and the house was dark again. Perhaps he went to the warden's room, Hans said. But he's gone to bed now. They got up and crept out of the garden. Then they ran into the forest. They ran a long way from the house. Chapter 11. It was afternoon when Otto left Elsa. He set off in the warden's boat. He liked the boat because it was light and moved quickly. Perhaps I can reach the village before evening, he said to himself. But he had no map and he was not certain. His foot hurt him and he felt a lot of pain. He put his leg in the cold water. The pain stopped for a time, but it came back again. The sun was already going down. I'm not going to stop yet, Otto said. He paddled quickly. Then he noticed some rocks in the river. There were a lot of these and the boat almost hit one. I'll have to stop soon, Otto thought. The boat may hit a rock in the dark. So, he found a place and tied the boat up. He had some food but he did not light a fire because he was tired. He put his blanket round him and lay on the ground. He was soon asleep. But he had bad dreams in the night. In his dream the plane was following him. He was in his boat and the plane was flying over him. He could not escape. When he woke up, his leg hurt him. The pain was very bad. It was not easy to get up. But he pulled himself into the boat and set off down the river. He had to take care because there were still rocks in the river. It was hard work. But the boat did not hit any rocks. After a few miles the river was clear again. But there was no sign of the village. The sun was very hot and Otto felt sick. His head was going round and round. So, he lay down in the boat and rested. His boat floated on down the river. When he opened his eyes, the village was near. He could see all the houses but he could not see any people. He wanted to land now. He put out his hand for the paddle. But it was not in the boat. I lost it while I was resting, Otto thought. What shall I do now? I can't see any people and the boat is floating past the village. I can't stop it. Otto sat up in the boat and shouted. At last, a man came out of his house. Otto waved to him and shouted, "Help me! I've lost my paddle and I can't stop the boat." "Don't be afraid," the man said. "I'll get my boat and follow you." Otto lay in the boat and waited. He was already past the village. Then the man came in his boat. He tied a rope to Otto's boat and in this way, he pulled it to the bank. The man helped Otto out of his boat and took him to his house. "Lie down on the bed," he said. "I'll go and get the doctor." When the doctor came, he first looked at Otto's foot. "Does it hurt you very much?" he asked Otto. Otto wanted to answer the doctor but he could not speak. His head was going round and round. The doctor put his hand on Otto's face. "This boy is very sick," he said. "He needs a good rest." The doctor took some medicine from his bag and put it in a glass. Then he made Otto drink the medicine. "The boy will sleep now," he said to the man. "Call me when he wakes up." Chapter 12. Hans. Karl and Elsa spent the night in the forest. They could not sleep because it was cold. At last, the sun came up. "The men will soon know that we are not in the cellar," Hans said. "Perhaps they will look for us. We must take care." "What happened to our boat?" Karl asked Elsa. "Two men came and carried it to the house," Elsa replied. "They took our bags and blankets too. But first I took my bag and hid it in the bushes. It's near the boat." "Then we must and get it," Hans said. They made their way through the forest. It was still early, but they took a lot of care. But there was no sign of the men. At last, they reached the river and they could see the motor boat. "Where did you put the bag?" Hans asked Elsa. "Show me and I'll get it." "In those bushes over there," Elsa answered. She pointed to some big bushes near the bank. "Let me go. I know the place." "No, I'll go," Hans told her. "You stay here." "Wait," Karl said. "I think that there's a man on the boat." Karl was right. They could see a man on the boat. He was cleaning it. "We'll have to wait," Hans said. "The man won't stay there all day when he goes. I'll run and get the bag." The man worked for an hour. After that he sat on the bank and rested. He was not far from the children. Then a second man came from the house. He was running down the path. "Those boys have escaped from the cellar," he shouted. "We must go and look for them. They can't go far." The first man answered. He got up. "There isn't a way through the forest and they haven't any shoes." "Where does this path go?" the second man asked. "Pointing down the river." "Oh. Only a few miles along the river bank," the first man replied. "Perhaps they have followed it. We can go and see. But don't be afraid. They can't escape. The nearest village is 25 miles from here." The two men set off down the path. Hans waited. Then he ran to the bushes and got the bag of food. Then they went back into the forest. They found a place among some bushes and ate their food. At noon the plane came again. It flew over the trees. But they could not see it. After that the plane flew off and the forest was quit again. Chapter 13. Otto drank the medicine and he slept all day. When he woke up, it was evening. He could hear the noise of a storm outside. It was raining hard and there was a strong wind. "Where am I?" Otto asked himself. He had a little pain in his foot but he didn't feel sick. "What am I doing in this room?" Then he remembered. His friends were prisoners in the forest and they needed help. Otto shouted and the man came into the room. He put on the light. "Ah! You're awake now," he said. "How do you feel? You were very sick this morning. So, the doctor gave you some medicine." But Otto was not listening. "Is there a policeman in the village?" he asked. "I must speak to him. My friends are prisoners in the forest." "I'll bring the policeman," the man said. "And the doctor? He's an important man in the village and he'll be able to help. Please be quick," Otto begged him. The man soon came back. The policeman and the doctor were with him. They took off their wet coats and sat near Otto's bed. "Tell us your story then," the doctor said. Otto spoke for a long time. He told them about the journey down the river. He told them about the plane and the men in the warden's house. "My friends are prisoners," Otto said. "Perhaps Elsa is a prisoner too. How can we save them?" The doctor asked Otto some questions. Then he turned to the policeman. "We must telephone the town and get help," he said. "We can't telephone," the policeman answered. "The storm has broken the telephone line. They won't mend the line before tomorrow. We can't wait," the doctor said. "We must go ourselves when the storm stops. I have a motor boat and there are good men in the village." Otto was listening. "I want to come too," he said. "Don't leave me here. I can show you the place." "Does your foot still hurt you?" the doctor asked. He looked at Otto's foot. "Yes. You can come with us. But you must stay in the boat. Your foot is still bad and you won't be able to walk." After that the doctor gave Otto some medicine. Then the men left him. The policeman went into the village. He was looking for help. He went to many houses and at last he found 4 men. They were ready to come with him. The doctor went to his boat. He worked there and soon the boat was ready. And policeman and his men also came to the boat. But the storm continued and they had to wait. At last, the storm stopped. "We can leave now," the doctor said. "We'll reach the place in the morning. Will 2 of you go and bring Otto here?" The policeman and one of his men brought Otto from the house. Then they all got into the boat. The boat moved up the river. It was still dark. But there was a big light on the boat. It shone on the water. When the light shone, they could see the river. "There are some big rocks in the river," Otto said to the doctor. "I know the river well," the doctor said. "But we'll take care." Otto was happy now. He was bringing help to his friends. Chapter 14. The 2 boys and Elsa were still in the forest. They did not go near the house and they did not see the men again. It was a warm day and they were tired. So, they slept. It was dark when Hans woke up. "Has Otto reached the village yet?" he asked himself. "If he's already there, he will soon bring help. They may come in the morning." Then the storm began. Karl and Elsa woke up too. They were all hungry. So, they ate some food. For a time, they were dry under the bushes. But then the rain came through the leaves. At last, the storm stopped. "We can't sleep here," Hans said. "The ground is wet now. Can't we go down the river bank?" Elsa asked. "We can follow that path. If a boat comes, we'll see it." "That's good idea," Hans said. "But we must watch the river or we may miss the boat." They went past the field. They wanted to have a look at the house. A light was still burning there. Then they went to the river. They found the path and followed it. It went along the bank of the river. But it was not a good path, they were thick bushes across it. They watched the river. But there was no sign of a boat. At last, they reached the end of the path and they had to stop. But there was a big tree near the river bank and it was dry there. "We've come about 4 miles. Hans said. "It's late now and the men in the house are asleep. Look under the tress and find some dry wood. Then we can light a fire." At last, they found enough wood and they lit a fire. "I'll watch while you rest," Hans said. "Then I'll wake Karl and he can watch." So, Elsa and Karl lay down near the fire and slept. Hans watched the river. He got some wood and put it on the fire. Then he woke Karl. "Is there any sign of the boat?" Karl asked. "Not yet," Hans told him. "But it's almost morning. Perhaps the boat will come then." Karl watched but still the boat did not come. He was tired but he did not wake Elsa. At last, he heard a noise. It was the noise of an engine. A boat was coming up the river. Karl ran and woke Hans. Elsa woke up too. They stood on the river bank and waited. The boat was very near now. Then they saw the big light from the boat. It was shining on the water. "They've come," Hans said. He shouted to the men in the boat. The doctor stopped the boat and turned the light on the bank. Otto could see his friends on the bank. "It's my friends," he said to the doctor. He called to them. The doctor brought the boat near the bank and he and the policeman landed. "We escaped from the cellar," Hans explained. "But the men are still in the house and the warden is their prisoner." "I'm glad that you are here," the doctor said. "It will be easy now because you are not in the house. Don't forget the warden," Hans said. "These men are bad and they may hurt him." "That's true," the doctor said. "But I have a good plan. Come on the boat and I'll tell you about it." They followed the doctor into the boat. Then the doctor told them his plan. Chapter 15. The doctor explained his plan. "The men are in the house now and they're asleep," he said. "We can go to the house but we can't get in because they've locked the doors. And the warden is their prisoner." "Are there a lot of men in the house?" the policeman asked. "There are 4 or 5. Hans told them. "I'm not certain. There are 7 of us," the doctor said. "You and Karl can help us too. That is part of my plan. We can't get into the house. So, the men must come out." "But they won't come out," Hans said. "When they see you, they'll stay in the house. They won't see us," the doctor explained. "They'll see you and Karl, they want to catch you again. So, they will come out of the house." "I understand now," Hans said. "Karl and I must go near the house." "That's the idea," the doctor said. "You must go near the house and make a noise. Shout. Say that you're hungry. The men will see you and they'll come out of the house. What shall we do then? Hans asked. Wait there. The doctor said. They'll come to you, then run. Run to the forest and they'll follow you. 2 of us will wait in the forest. The men will be tired and we'll catch them. Then we must take the leader. The doctor continued. 1 or 2 men will still be with him. But that part will be easy. I'll wait behind the house. The men will follow you across the field. They won't close the door behind them. Then we'll go into the house. It's a good plan, Hans said. But we mustn't make any mistakes. The doctor told them. After that the doctor took the boat up the river. Then he found a good place and stopped the boat. We'll leave the boat here, he said. 2 men will stay on the boat. Otto, you must stay here too. Your foot is still bad and you can't move quickly. Elsa, you must stay with Otto. But what shall we do here? Elsa asked. Watch the river. The doctor said. You have work to do. 1 of the men may escape. You must stop him. After that the doctor and his men left the boat. Hans led them through the forest. At last, they reached the field. It was light now and they could see the house. Hans showed them the path. This goes to the